Thank you, Betty. Our program, as I think many of you know, is Ned Seaton. He's editor-in-chief and publisher of the Manhattan Mercury. Later this year, he will have been with the Mercury for 20 years, which kind of surprises me, but he's a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Harvard. Before joining the Mercury, he worked at daily newspapers in Phoenix, Los Angeles, St. Petersburg, Florida, as well as a stint with the Associated Press. Giving this review and forecast for most of the 20 years since he's been back in Manhattan. I'm not sure quite when he started, but a year or two after he got back here. And I have introduced him almost all of those occasions with a couple of exceptions. Therefore, I will keep this very brief. I want to just give you one newsy tidbit that he probably won't cover. You heard this first, right here. Ned is getting remarried in less than a month. So he may be a little nervous today. I ask you to welcome my possibly shaky son, Ned.
So, I gave this similar speech about a week ago to the other Rotary Club, where I was, by the way, also introduced as a visiting Rotarian. It was a pretty big crowd, and there was some remarks about the crowd. And by the way, thanks for that. And I think it was Linda Weiss who said, "Well, it's enthusiasm for our speaker today," and my fiance said, "Nah, it's just New Year's resolutions." She's right on it. So thank you, and thanks for coming, Mom. Hope my hair look all right. So an old editor of mine in Florida used to say, "When I die and go to hell, the first thing I'm going to do is find the guy who invented the wine cooler and punch him in the nose. The second thing is," and then he'd say whatever it was he happened to be hacked off right at that moment about. Well, I figure when I kick the bucket, the third paragraph of the obit will say something like, "Routinely relied on bathroom humor in a feeble attempt to crawl out of the enormous shadow cast by his father's accomplishments." So I do appreciate the opportunity today. The ticking of the clock is growing louder, but, hey, some of these toilet jokes are pretty damn funny, Dad. So the basic job here is to, as I've done for quite a while, is to take a look at the past year and give you a review of the top news stories from 2015 in Manhattan. I also try to look ahead at the upcoming year, and in 15 years of doing this or thereabouts, I have to say for the record that I have perfectly predicted everything. If you checked this a year ago, I told you that K-State would make a bowl game with the wide receiver playing quarterback, and the best player laid up for the year with injury, and that one of the top news stories of the year would involve a formation by the marching band at halftime of the first non-conference game of the year. As you might imagine, more on that in a minute. And before I get to the list for 2015 and the Nostradamus Act for 2016, I want to mention a few of my favorite items from the past year that did not make the list. These are the things that continue to remind me and all of us that there's really not much need for fiction. First, it was a fantastic year for headlines at the Manhattan Mercury. Thanks to the skill of our slightly twisted editors Megan Moser and Greg Deering, and to the opportunities that present themselves for this kind of weirdness. So I'll mention later here the matter of the K-State band and what the Jayhawk appeared to be doing. But as you might recall, there was quite a bit of reaction to that incident, and K-State had to deal with the aftermath, which of course led to our strong consideration of a big headline on the second day story on that package, blowback. Discretion being the better part of valor, we didn't actually use that one. The one we did use, though, came in August when the city government had to close the pool for the second time in a brief period for a biohazard cleaning in what you might call a bathroom incident. The headline on that story was, City Park Pool Sees Number 2 Closure. Ticking of the clock is growing louder, isn't it? Then there were the news items that didn't require the funny head. There was the matter of the woman on Browning whose house was declared uninhabitable last January, with the list of residents including 3 flea-infested dogs, 2 cats, and 11 parrots. There was the guy on Fort Riley Boulevard charged by the feds with shipping 187 rounds of ammo and an Uzi to an address in England, evidently hiding all that in a ceramic ornament featuring 3 owls sitting on a log. There was the item in May about the sentencing of the Manhattan Man for kidnapping. His defense lawyer claimed that he sang Kumbaya with the victims. Not figuratively, but literally. Barry Wilkerson contended that the guy's behavior did not rise to the level of the Boy Scout. The judge sided with Barry, sentenced the guy to 7 years. In that very same day's paper on page 2, which is where you find all these good things, was an item about the arrest of D. Scott Fritchen, a local celebrity by virtue of his incredibly arcane questions to Bill Snyder at press conferences. And to be fair, D. Scott Fritchen is a darn good feature writer who I admire very much, and there but for the grace of God go I. But anyway, he got arrested at just after 2 o'clock in the morning in Aggieville, where all good things happen, because he got arrested for battery of a law enforcement officer because he threw a Philly cheesesteak at a cop. This was after a go-round between Fritchen and his boss, Tim Fitzgerald, and Rusty Wilson about who was peeping where during a swimsuit competition at Last Chance. The whole matter of Last Chance and the bar world down there, as you know, is a constant source of these stories. Rusty has now evidently ducked out of that business again, which is too bad for us. There was the episode where a guy got arrested for calling in a bomb threat at Florence, evidently because he didn't want to go to work that day. There was the basketball team, which was a year-long joke or dramatic tragedy, depending on the day and your point of view. This is last season I'm talking about. The highlight of that, or the low light, depending on your point of view, was when Bruce Weber ran off Marcus Foster, who was the best player on that team. Foster did a whole bunch of dumb stuff along the way, as you might remember. But the last straw came when he tweeted from South Padre Island that he was lit on the beach, along with a photo of himself and a fake lizard named Randolph. He was gone in a matter of hours afterward. Foster, as you may know, is not majoring in rocket science at Creighton. So that might have been my favorite item of the year, but for one thing, the Country Stampede, which is another great source of these items. The after-action report last spring by Larry Couchman and the EMS people out there noted a person had been treated at the scene due to ingesting a large volume of a concoction based on vodka involving Adderall and Viagra. Now, if you think about that a little bit, I mean, the vodka's obvious and the Viagra, well, you know. But those two combined with Adderall? I guess the thinking was to maintain serious focus on the job at hand while remaining drunk. Okay, so now I'm beginning to drop below even my own low standards, and Dad's starting to sweat over here. So I better get all grown up and serious for a few minutes and look at the top 10 news stories of 2015 in reverse order. So the countdown, number 10 of 2015 was the never-ending football stadium project. The development from last year was the opening of the new Veneer complex, along with the gigantic video board and the north end zone seating. This was a $68 million project for a 132,000 square foot building. There's more coming, which we'll get back to here in a minute. Number 9, the fort gets cut. The Pentagon nicked Fort Riley's troop strength by 615 after the community turned out big a year ago to support the post in that listening session over in Junction City. That was not nearly as big a cut as it could have been, but it also marked the beginning of cuts, which was a reversal of the big Army boom of the last 14 years. Number 8 was the election to the City Commission, in particular of Linda Morse, who meant that 3 progressives took over the majority of the commission, including a couple members of this club who were on the commission. It also meant that 3 women had the majority on the commission, which is the first time in 20 years that that's happened, and led to another great headline in the Mercury at the time, City Moms. I can explain that if you'd like, but it'll take a while, so I'll pass at the moment. So the number 7 story of the year was the flood. 4.85 inches of rain fell in 24 hours in May, which is one of the biggest ever. A bunch of cars were stranded on North 3rd Street and near the campus, and the college kids had canoe races. Number 6 is the K-State building boom. There were a dozen major projects underway on campus. Not coincidentally, K-State announced a $1 billion fundraising campaign and said they were already 3/4 of the way done. Okay, number 5 was the Starship Enterprise. Yeah, so the K-State band did a halftime gig at the first football game this past fall and seemed to form into the Star Trek ship, attacking the form of a Jayhawk. But it looked like something far more pornographic if you wanted to look at it that way, honestly. And so Frank Trace took the blame and had to sit out of a game, and in the process becoming a cult hero around here. Somebody launched a GoFundMe that raised a bunch of money for the band. Incidentally, am I the only noob here who doesn't have a GoFundMe account? Anyway, number 4, Irwin Army Hospital, which is still not open. This is sort of like the lead story from Weekend Update, Saturday Night Live in 1978. You know, Generalissimo Francisco Franco is still holding on valiantly in his fight to remain dead. Anyway, the hospital is now more than 3 years overdue, and the old one is inadequate by everybody's reckoning. The Mercury dug up a whole slew of lawsuits that kind of shine light on why this is happening. The subs sued the general, and the general is suing the government. It's a mess. Okay. Number 3, the big of the top 10 stories of 2015 was that the great man himself makes the Hall of Fame. At this stage, the notion that Bill Snyder would be inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame is about as newsy as saying that the sun came up this morning. But, you know, if you think about the big picture and what he's done and where he started from, K-State in 1989, well, there's a reason why there's a stadium and a highway named for the guy. It's a big story. Number 2 was the Fort Riley bomber. Some kid just out of Topeka West High School was caught by the FBI trying to blow up Fort Riley. His name was John T. Booker, and he was evidently inspired by the Islamic State. We gather that he's about to plead guilty, although there's just been a recent delay in that. That appears to be where that's headed. And the number 1 story of last year was NBAF. I've told you this before here, that it's the decade of NBAF. For those of you who hate acronyms as much as I do, what we're talking about is the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility, the $1 billion federal lab they're building between Denison and North Manhattan on the north edge of the campus. We're about halfway through this decade, and at this point, the newsworthiness of the story is probably declining. But the big news in 2015 was that the deal was finally done. Congress authorized the final $300 million to begin construction, and it's being built. It's no longer a question of if, it's a question of when. Current projections say it'll be 2022 when the thing is fully operational. and perhaps it will beat Irwin Army Hospital to the punch. So, okay, so now for the Crystal Ball Act in 2016. And the biggest question of the year has been answered already. The great man himself is coming back for another season, since apparently neither Sharon, nor Shannon, nor Meredith, nor Ross, nor Whitney overruled him. We seriously doubt Sharon would tell him to quit, since we suspect she would rather he continue to get out of the house and not dictate to her exactly how to turn on the crock pot. Calm this thing down, right? Love that line. Anyway, Bill is back on the sidelines for 2016, and that means that the parlor game of when will Bill retire, and what will John do, and is Sean up to it, and who did Brent Venables offend anyway, will continue on for another year. I was up at Veneer last week, by the way, and saw Bill with the yellow tie and his 17th cup of coffee, moving between meetings and writing diagonal notes to people, and nothing new. I also happened to see Sean meeting with John Curry behind a closed door, and when I asked John what was going on, he said, "Just finishing up his contract." Gotcha. So by the way, I would expect the football team to be decent next year. Not great. Lots of returning talent, really. But Bill is always his best with a veteran quarterback. And, the starting quarterback at this past season got hurt immediately, and then the starter for the rest of the year basically was a guy who couldn't start at Cheney High School. So there'll be a new quarterback next year probably, and there'll be some bumpiness as a result of that. It sounds like it might be the Ertz kid again if he can keep from blowing out his knee walking down the stairs. The men's basketball team, well, it looked like a complete disaster before the season started, but this group appears to be pretty competitive, and we'll see how Bruce Weber can rally a team that he sort of threw together in a matter of a few months. Or alternatively, we could all root for the former K-State coaches, who are collectively 57-6 this year, compared to 11-5 for the Bruce Cats. There's Dana the Duck, Huggy, the Glare, and Boomer Kruger. And by the way, the only unbeaten team left in college basketball is SMU, which is coached by none other, basically coached by Tim Jankovich, formerly of K-State and Manhattan High. Thank goodness for Woldridge and Asbury. If those guys were coaching ranked teams at the moment, there'd be mass depression in Manhattan. Well, otherwise, so my thought about next year is that we're sort of into this new phase. I've been talking about the decade of NBAF, and that's still a very big story. But the nature of the story has shifted, and it's less newsy, honestly, since it's a done deal. And really, it'll probably only get newsy again once they start bringing in serious numbers of people and serious diseases. In the meantime, the story is really about the spin-off effects of NBAF and how well the community takes advantage of the opportunity here. That's a big and important question. Fort Riley, nothing really enormous on the horizon for 2016 in terms of the big picture future of the place. There's going to be a brigade coming back, and there'll be a lot of people leaving at different times. My expert source, John Armbrust, says he expects the Fort Headquarters unit to deploy late in the year, which means the honchos will be gone from the community. It's also possible that there will be up to 8,000 people gone at one time if some of those deployments overlap. But, I mean, the basic story is lots of people in and out. At the moment, there are no more big cuts planned, so we're not hanging on a Pentagon decision about overall troop levels the way we were a year ago. Congress, as you might recall, passed a 2-year budget, so that stuff won't be as frantic. But, of course, basically, the government's trying to cut, and Manhattan is a government town. That's sort of the big picture. The other pillar in our government town is K-State. And the building boom continues. They're adding on to the football stadium again, closing the North Bowl the bowl on the north end to the tune of $15 million. If still, the state government's financial picture means that you can expect I mean, at some point in the future, funding cuts to K-State. The governor's budget proposal that came out yesterday appears to include a moderate increase to the operating budget from the general fund. If I can be as specific as I can be. So, over the long haul, the K-State will probably have to lean more heavily on tuition and private support, which is nothing particularly new, and doesn't seem to have slowed anything down. One big issue this year is the development of the North Campus corridor, which will become before the City Commission later this year, and sort of who pays for what in that whole arrangement has yet to be sorted out and is an important question. As I may have said, this is a government town, and politics is therefore important. Tim Huelskamp, our congressman, is up for re-election. He made a deal with Paul Ryan, so he might get a committee assignment that means something, and that will blunt some of the critiques of his opponents. The question is whether either of his primary opponents, Alan LaPolice or Roger Marshall, can gin up enough Republicans in August to get rid of him. If both of them continue running, I very seriously doubt that would happen. And meanwhile, Manhattan's own Jerry Moran is running for re-election to the Senate. It doesn't look like he'll have much trouble, nor does it appear that any problems await the legislative incumbents, although the Republicans will routinely find somebody to run against Sidney Carlin and Tom Hawk, and of course anybody can step in it once the legislature's in session, which is when nobody is safe, including everybody in this room. Other likely snoozers include the county commission races and the various department heads over there who are for some reason still elected. I say likely, but you never know in the political season. Look at Donald Trump. You saw that coming. So anyway, there's likely to be some good stories. One bit of drama coming up shortly is will Ben Wilson utter a single sentence as the chairman of the county commission? There will probably be a sales tax measure on the ballot this fall to pay for road repairs. If they can fix the ditch out in front of the Mercury's parking lot, I'm all for it. In the public school system here, Bob Shannon is retiring, so there will be a new superintendent starting July 1. They expect to name a successor this month or early next, after they get done with this kabuki dance of pretending to interview people publicly while not releasing their names ahead of time. Not that I'm editorializing, Bob. As you know, superintendents really run the school systems, and elected school boards basically just approve the work of the superintendent and then complain about not getting enough money from Topeka. In fact, I can stand up here and guarantee that that we at the Mercury will spill thousands of gallons of ink in 2016 on stories in which the school board, the county commission, and Karen McCullough all complain about the miserly legislature. It's enough to make a guy like me want to hand a page each week over to the Koch brothers in the name of equal time. Just kidding, kidding. Anyway, other things coming. It looks like the school board may have to refight the issue of the Manhattan High mascot. That, in case you missed it, there's a group up on campus, K-State campus, who's raising the issue again. We'll see how far that gets. The City Commission may very well go around again on a couple of issues, rental inspections, and possibly about rules to specifically protect the employment and housing rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. That's a mouthful. Incidentally, my college-age son got involved with a campus group where he goes to school that called itself LBGTW, the W standing for whatever. I thought it was kind of cool in a self-deprecating way. And he was the W. So there's ongoing discussion of recreation and sports facilities in Manhattan, which does not appear to be heading towards a public vote in 2016, but is likely to keep moving along this year. Other than that, hang on. there's more entertainment on the way. You know, we can always count on people drinking oddball concoctions at the Stampede. We can figure on bathroom accidents. We can assume that college kids will gin up sex-related jokes, so there will be plenty to write and talk about a year from now. I should say a couple things. We will obviously miss the Rusty Wilson news machine. We will surely miss Riverboat Bob Kraus, who I think was a member of this club at one time. You know, Riverboat Bob, he rolled the dice. He put deals together. He made stuff happen. They helped us sell a lot of papers. Bob's gone on to the next world, leaving lots of us here sad and a little bit bored. But hope does spring eternal. If you read carefully the story about Rusty Wilson selling his bar, he noted that he is consulting with the Gronkowski brothers, the youngest of whom tended bar at Kites this past summer, and who proceeded to get beat out as a fullback by a Manhattan High kid. Anyway, the latest Gronk says he's going to the NFL, but, you know, I'd say look out for Gronk's Pub at the corner of 12th and Morrow sometime soon. We can only hope. Thank you.
We have time for questions.
Over here.
Over here.
Gotta go.
Tell us about the online. Do you have a lot of hits on that?
Tell me about the online. I'm in favor of it. Yeah, we have a whole lot of traffic on our website, and we're developing a variety of other things. So we have a website, we have an app for the Mercury that you can get for your iPhone, or we have a mobile edition. We're in the midst of developing a new community information app. I'd like to see several of you later about advertising. We have developed a glossy magazine recently that we're very happy with. But specifically with regard to the digital stuff, it's growing, it's doing well, and you know it's obviously a big part of our future. Yes, we have a whole bunch of traffic. I'll be glad to get into the nitty-gritty of the stats, but that's the bottom line.
About the Royals winning the World Series, was that on your list? I'm surprised they didn't sneak in.
Well, you know, this is a local news list, and we determine it by, well, it's kind of Lincoln's cabinet when we determine what the big stories are. You know that story? That's where Lincoln assembled his cabinet, and he says, all right, those in favor say aye, and everybody says aye. Those opposed say nay, and Lincoln says nay. The nays have it. So, that'd be Lincoln. So blame him. It's his fault. No, but the Royal, you know, the Royals. That's a great story, and as you know real well, I'm a big Royals fan, and most of these stories, in fact, all these stories are really local stories. They're things that kind of originate here, and the Royals there are a lot of fans here, and I guess you could consider it a local story, but we didn't. So it didn't make the list of things to consider. Fair question.
Yeah, so why didn't the school board identify all of the candidates at one time?
Well, you'd have to ask them. I think the rationale that Marcia Roselle gave was that they didn't want to endanger some of those candidates' ability to contend for jobs elsewhere, which I never quite figured out. I mean, but because it was only a couple days difference. But whatever. I don't know. We didn't much like it, so I'm not going to stand here and defend it. Sorry, Bob. What does he care? Yeah.
What is the process for coming up with the top 10 stories?
Okay, so editors go through the papers from the past year and assemble a list of about 30 stories that we think are big potential top stories, and then we just pass ballots around to everybody in the newsroom, and they vote, and we tally up the votes, and then if we think it's a dumb idea, we switch them. But yeah, I think on all the years we've been doing it, I can only maybe remember switching 15 or 20. No, just, I don't even remember switching that many. You know, with regard to this speech and these oddball incidents, I keep a file, and every year it gets fatter. You know, so that's my method, because it's just nonstop. All you got to do is read page 2, and you guys could all get up here and give this speech. Anything else? Okay, thank you.